Hello and welcome to another episode of the Talking Talent podcast. My name is Ben. I am the host and joined with me, I should say, my glamorous assistant and co-host, Dale Taggart. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Very well, thank you. I think I'll nail the intro one day. You never know.
No, you won't.
No. Maybe this will just become our thing. They'll be like, oh, what's he going to come up with this week? Here we go. Never mind. How's things going for you this week?
Yeah, all right. Still in the old unemployment world, tackling that job market. Always odd to be on this side of the fence instead of the usual side of the fence, but we've got to keep trucking along. How about yourself?
Yeah, very similar. I've had a few interviews, which has been nice, been exciting. Hopefully, by the time this goes out, we would have been in roles for about a month or so. That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah, fingers crossed.
That would be lovely.
If not, it's really sad.
Yeah, it's really sad, and we'll probably set up a GoFundMe page at this point to help us pay our mortgages.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I refuse to give this back to.
We've got a really exciting topic this week, and it's one that I think both of us have had experience from both sides of things, I would say. I've had the privilege of being able to work from home very flexibly in a lot of roles for a number of years. Obviously, I know with yourself, you've not had that much flexibility until quite recently. Obviously, the culture as well, I suppose from generally, the trends seem to be more hybrid at the moment. But I have noticed more and more roles that are popping up to various types of positions in various industries seem to be more 4 to 5 days in the office now rather than that 3 and 2 split. I don't know if you found the same.
Yeah, or some that I'm starting to see more that are just flat out 5 days in the office, no exceptions. Some of them are very aggressive about it, making a real hard kind of stance on there, and it's sad to see. I think choice and flexibility. I thought we all shifted out of the blue to if you're working from home and making it work whilst restrictions were in place, whilst we were dealing with a pandemic. A lot of us were trying to make it work. At the start of the pandemic, I didn't have the privilege that I have now with a dedicated room solely as an office with everything that I need as a setup. My multiple screens and my trusty mic. But we had to make do, and we did that to keep these businesses working and trucking along, and it worked. Things were getting done, and look, I always get the argument that people say, well, what if you work in a business where actually there's people that can't work from home? Well, that's the reality of things that certain people can and can't do, and I think if you can make someone's life better, and it actually doesn't matter where they do the work because fundamentally they work on a laptop, and everything can be done. I think you should endeavour to do it where possible, and if anything, if businesses see it, they can save themselves a lot of money in rent. Because if you don't need as much office space anymore,
exactly, you have that hot desking kind of situation, don't you, as well? So you don't need dedicated spaces for absolutely everyone.
But if you are going to drag everyone back in the office, I don't want to be going into a stingy office that's run down and not been renovated in about 25 years.
This is the argument, though, isn't it? Now is if you're an organisation and you are getting everybody to come in 4 to 5 days a week. Firstly, the office needs to be a good workplace. I'm not expecting to work at the Ritz or the Shard every single day, but having, free coffee, I think is a basic that should be there everywhere. I know it's not in certain places, and it kind of blows my mind really. But it's got to be a nice environment, because surely you want a good culture. Good culture comes from these sort of basic little things that just makes it better. We're not expecting it to be, absolutely like the poshest place in the world. But if you're in the office 4 to 5 days a week, you want your own desk, you want your own space to work with your team. You want a couple of meeting rooms. You want a nice break room to get away from your desk. And not necessarily in a good area. It doesn't matter so much. But if there's, amenities nearby and, places to go out and eat and drink and socialise or whatever, then even better. for me, just the basics, it's got to be a nice office.
Yeah, and it's got to be an environment set up for people. I think, and again, we look at certain people, people that are neurodiverse. Myself with the ADHD, the fun that it can be sometimes. When I go to an office, there's just so much going on. I find it harder to, really concentrate because there's music playing. And I'm not going to tell someone to not play music either. Like I'm not going to be that guy. But there's music playing. There's different conversations going on. There's a lot of kind of going on. And then I've been somewhere where I've tried to put some headphones in to try and block that out, and I've been told, no, take them out. You're being rude. And then you're not really getting the work done. I've always found myself to be so much more efficient at home. I can, again, I probably, to be fair, it's not always a good thing, but I'd start earlier, finish later than I would if I was, physically in an office.
That's a whole different debate. A whole different debate, that one.
Am I really getting that time back on myself? But actually, if you commute into London when you're going to the office, then.
But it's also. Yeah, but it's also the fact that you can just go, I'm done, close the laptop, and you walk out your office, you close the door, you're home. You're there. You don't think, oh, okay, I've got to walk to the station, that's 10 minutes, got to wait for a train 10 minutes, then I've got an hour commute, then it's 10-minute drive or whatever from the station home, then you're stuck in traffic, so it's a 20-minute drive, there's a crash, it's an hour. All of a sudden it's taking you 2.5 hours to get home for an hour and a half commute. And it is that, it opens up the debate so much in terms of like your work-life balance, your generally mental health side of things, to be able to just be home and be comfortable in your own surroundings. Saves money on uniforms. You don't have to buy loads of shirts, loads of trousers. You can save a few quid there because you wear your own clothes. If you're on Teams calls and things like that, obviously you want to look smarter, of course, but you can put a shirt on, put a jacket on for your call and things, but still be comfortable at home. Yeah. So I think it's quite an interesting debate. Now, for me personally, from my own kind of experience so far, for the last kind of 6 years or so, bar about a year, I've had very much field-based roles. So I'd be in the office once a week, once a fortnight maybe. So I'd never have my own desk. I'd just go in and hope there's a desk somewhere or book a meeting room for the day. And our team would be there. We'll have a team meeting and you just work from there. But a lot of it is I've been restaurant-based, working hospitality for years. It's great to go sit at the back of a restaurant and go and work from there. But I'd also have those 2 to 3 days a week at home. And that's where I'm getting all my interviews done. So you have to work quite effectively. Because I was similar to you. I didn't get as much work done in an office because you're collaborating with people. You're getting to know people, having conversations, and actually working together. You're not doing necessarily, not your day-to-day, but your sort of daily routine stuff as much. You're doing your more strategic stuff, your sort of longer-term strategy stuff. So for me, being in an office was weird. And one of my last roles when I was head of recruitment, it was 4 to 5 days in the office. And it was like a 2-hour commute or 2.5 hour door to door each way for me. And that took it out of me. But I was lucky my HRD said, look, come in 3 days a week. That's fine. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I knew I had those long days, but I was fine. I could deal with that because I had the Monday and Friday flexibility and I was working on the train. So I was probably working 14, 15 hours, 3 of those days. Then the rest I'd make up for by doing like a normal 8-hour day. Do you know what I mean? But I had that flexibility, and it was down to me what I wanted to do in terms of that. Then,
and I think what I've really struggled with as well, even on the office days, where you go in and you can't have meetings, at your desk. You can't just open up, even if you have headphones in, people can't see. People don't want you having meetings in the desk, and there are some people that are very, kind of. I've been in companies where a more senior person walks in, sees you one thing, kicks off at you, and you're like, whoa, I couldn't find a space to go.
Yeah.
How many times were we in our last place where we worked together where, I go and find a room and you've got it, and then I'm like, you know.
Yeah, it's not enough. That's the problem when you've got these.
Towards you.
Yeah. That's the problem when you are, like, especially in our roles as well. You've got to have private, confidential conversations. Or you've got to have quiet so you can actually listen to the person, take it all in, write some notes, etc. So you do need those sort of quiet meeting spaces. But when you're in such a big office, you have little pods or you have little booths or whatever it may be, or you have proper, decent sized meeting rooms, etc. But sometimes, and it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it's generally Tuesdays. People going to the office on a Tuesday, Monday at home. Tuesday's your big day. You meet everyone. You line up all your meetings. You can never get any time in the office to be able to do your job.
Yeah.
So it's so difficult then. And, like you said, the amount of times that we're bumping into each other, fighting for a pod or a little room at the side or whatever, just to have a conversation or jump on a Teams call because we need to have a meeting or whatever with someone. It's just, sometimes it's a case of, if I'm at home, I can do that whenever.
Yeah.
But also equally, if you're in the office together, some of the meetings you'd organise have it in person, so you can go and sit in the canteen and have a coffee, or you book the meeting room because it's a formal meeting. But you can collaborate more, and you get to. It's not just I've got to ring Dale, so I'll do a Teams call or drop you a Teams message, but you're on a call, so you've got to wait. I could just in one of the offices we worked in before, just look next to me, you're there. I'm like, you got 5 minutes, can you have a look at this? It's easy to collaborate then, and you build up that culture and teamwork. So you can see so many pros and cons for both, which is why for me, hybrid is the best model.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've always, my whole career has been in, businesses and organisations that have been multi-site. So
yeah,
I'm always going to have to be having Teams meetings because I'm not, I'm not going to go travelling from Brighton to Birmingham and then back down to London just for a half an hour meeting. Like that's just logically that's never going to make sense. So for me, I don't get always the benefit of being able to I'll just change those meetings into in person because I would still be having to have those meetings over Teams because it wouldn't make sense to travel an hour or 2 hours to have an hour meeting. It wouldn't make sense at all. So, that's why it's always kind of thrown me a little bit whenever there's been some conversation about shifting back to full-time in the office in those types of organisations because you're like, well, we're already multi-site. How it would make things worse. But, I've also been, in places where I've had to run assessment centres and I accept I have to be in on those days. There are certain tasks that I have to do in person and that's fine. I've never had a problem with that. I think it's more for me, I think, is the toxicity around the debate.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think where people assume that people that work from home or they might be working in, a cafe somewhere, it's the assumption that those people don't work. And
yeah, it winds me up so much. We're adults. And the problem is there's a small proportion of people that do that and they do take the mick.
But you've got to be judged by your output. And I think if you still have to do a job, then you have to do a job. If that person isn't doing a job, then there are repercussions for that. And I always think there were always...
And it's pretty obvious. It's highlighted pretty damn quickly.
Yeah, and people did that when we were all in the office, might I add. There were always people that were not doing as they were told when they were physically in the office with everyone else. So those people were just... those people. It doesn't matter. They would slack off whether they're in the office or whether they're at home. Might be a little bit easier for them to slack off at home. However, we're very much output driven. You will get caught out if you're not doing the work. And, there'll be repercussions for that. But the idea that everyone's just completely slacking off, don't get me wrong, it probably hasn't helped that people make TikToks about, squiggling their mouse and whatever else. It doesn't help the argument.
The one with the fan. Have you seen the one on the fan when it turns?
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're always output driven. And, and I think it's about choice. And there are so many reasons to keep flexibility. I think the flexibility shouldn't just stop at, being able to work from home a set number of days a week or whatever else. Like flexibility because life, you just try and be, things pop up, at the end of the day, it's beneficial. I want to go to the dentist. I can only do that Monday to Friday. So, but my dentist is literally a 5-minute walk away from my house. Yeah. But if I was working full time in an office in London,
it's half a day or a full day off.
Yeah, I'd just have to take a day off, and that's a waste of annual leave for me, for example. But also, if someone's unwell, now let's be honest, there are certain things that you do if you're sick with, you do not want to leave the house. And I'm not advocating for if you're sick, to still work because you're working from home. Although I can't take my own advice on that, I refuse.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Because I can't. I don't. I like to take my mind off being unwell, and I feel like if I can still do something, I still feel productive with a day, and
of course,
that's why I do it. But we know that the data shows that there are less sick days taking place, and we know how people like to throw out sick note Britain in the past, and they'd say, yeah, how much money it costs the economy and whatever else. Well, this is actively meaning, that people are taking less sick days because there are certain things that you just go, I don't feel comfortable. And you shouldn't. Let's be honest. If we learn anything from COVID, if you've got anything that's even remotely infectious, why are you going to go and get on a packed train and give it to loads of other people for it to be spread around?
Exactly. And if you're in an open plan office as well, you're coughing, sneezing, whatever, people around you are going to catch that. And all of a sudden, that one person who could have just worked from home for 2 days has now infected 10 people who are now actually off for 2 days. So you actually lost, 20 days worth of work because of one person is not well and you didn't let them work from home.
And what about, people that want to do school pickup,
Exactly. A half hour out your day. And as you said, literally at the beginning of all of this, you're a nightmare that you will start early and finish later because you feel obliged, because you almost feel like you've got to, not you've got to, but you feel like you want to give back to the company because they're giving you that flexibility.
Yeah.
So, from my side, if you're looking at it from a company or organisation ownership or management, whatever you want to call it, surely you'd advocate for that a little bit more, because you're doing it's as you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back situation.
I've always felt more productive on those work from home days as well, because I've got up, I'm able to have some time, like have breakfast. I might jump on the bike, I can take the dog for a walk, and then I can sit down, and I feel so much better, and I feel I can really get myself through the day. I'm more.
You're energized. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sitting on a train sometimes, like it's just a commute can sometimes really just. Sometimes you're tired by the time you even get to the office, and you're not then your most energized, productive self for it. And then
your train's delayed,
distractions.
Bad weather, you're freezing cold, your back then starts playing up, and you're taking you 3 hours for an hour and 10 journey. All of a sudden, you've started on a bad note, and then you've got to be in the office all day long. If the heating's not working or whatever it may be, or it puts you in a bad mood. So you're not productive. Whereas if you're at home, you can get an extra hour's sleep, so you feel more energized. Do some exercise, as you said, take the dog for a walk or whatever, and all of a sudden, if you're more energized, you're feeling more productive. You're going to be more productive.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of an organisation going, well, I trust him to do his job, or I trust her to do their job. It's just common sense.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. Not everyone is going to benefit from it, because some people just don't like it. Like I said, they might not have the right setup at home. Some people just, for certain reasons, I know loads of other reasons get thrown around. And that is fine. The whole point is that it's meant to be, not keeping it a hard and fast rule. And having that option there. Because actually, I think the key thing we get to is then, where does it leave you as an organisation in the market for the best talent in certain roles?
Exactly.
And the best talent will dictate and have more choice on where they're going. And, it might be that those people really, value the hybrid working. And that's something that they are not willing to give up. And I think we're not going to see en masse people moving back to the office. I think what you're going to see is a lot of businesses had the opportunity to scale back on their office space. They were able to get out of whatever leases they had, or they sold off buildings if they owned the buildings, and they scaled back. They changed up how they did it, and they benefited from that. So they can't call people back to the office because they actually don't have the space anymore. And then you've got to start thinking, oh, well, if we want to bring everyone back to the office, we're actually going to have to spend money to do so. Now, don't get wrong. Some businesses clearly in America, the US, have done that. I've seen funny stories of these return to work mandates, and then people show up back to work and there's not enough desk space for...
Yeah, they're working in the lifts and things like that, aren't they? You think,
yeah,
it's just ridiculous. And you're going to lose your best staff because, one, they don't want to do that. But then if they do get over that and go, oh, fine, okay, we've got to go back in, and you don't have a desk, or you don't have meeting rooms, you don't have a canteen or whatever it may be, Why would you? You'd just be like, I'm not going to do this.
But also, you see these people doing return to work mandates, and they're not actually giving any more money to do so. But you're expecting then your employees to spend not just their more time and their energy on it, but more financial, kind of implications to it, because it may be not only that you've got to do travel, but you've got to maybe childcare. Obviously, we know is very, very expensive.
Very much so, yeah.
I'm not going to leave my dog at home for 8 hours. I'm going to be spending money to have him with a dog sitter or a dog walker to come in the middle of the day, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There are all these other costs that are kind of thrown in, and we know the economy. Cost of living crisis has hit everyone. It's not been great. Mortgages, gone way up. Like, I miss being in 2%. That was a dream. And that was 4.8% of my current one. Like, sucks. But there's more to it, and I think it's about kind of keeping it open and thinking about how does it impact your staff. What do your staff want? Because if you've got 80% of your staff saying we don't want this, how is that going to impact the productivity of everyone? And
yeah,
again,
absolutely.
If you need people to be in and be more structured in those hybrid ones, because sometimes I think it's more open, and I kind of probably going back on it a little bit, but where people say, "Oh, I've just got the flexibility, I just do whatever 2 days I want." I don't think that's beneficial either. Like, I agree. I've not liked it. When I've for example, the times where you're off from paternity and I'm rocking up to the office, it's just me.
Yeah,
I'm the only one, like, in the team. There's no productivity for me. I'm in the office for the sake of hitting my numbers required to be in the office.
It's a tick box, isn't it, then, for you, rather than doing anything constructive. Yeah, I totally agree. Completely agree with you.
So I'm getting all the downside and none of the positives.
Exactly. And I think, the main thing that I've found is companies that want people to go back into the office, they all say it's all about culture and collaboration and teamwork. Completely agree. And I think hybrid's the best way for it. So you're kind of balancing everything quite nicely. But as you said, you've got to have set days. Not necessarily set in stone, but like 1 or 2 days out of your 3, for example, that you've got to work in the office have got to be your whole team are in. So you do get to collaborate, and you do get to build those relationships with your peers. Because yes, you can build relationships on, virtually like we're talking now, but there's only so far that goes. But sometimes when you are together, you can have a chat. Yeah, of course it does. But you can have like general chats. You can then be like, "Oh, do you want to go grab some lunch together?" And that's when you start talking outside. Yeah, have our customary chips. But that's when you have those conversations. You get to know each other on a more personal level because you're not always talking about work. And that's where you really start to build up that trust and that friendship. So it's more just, I'm not saying you've got to be best friends with everyone you work with, of course, but there's certain people that you sort of naturally gravitate towards more because you get to know them. And then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, like Dale's working on this. I'll go and help him because I can offer something." Or, "Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, Dale will know. I know he's covered that before." But I'd never know that, in your previous role, for example, you managed the whole early careers department side of things and was like the sort of subject matter expert on that. If I hadn't spoken to you outside of, well, not outside of work, but in the office, just general chit chat, I'd never have known that. I'm not going to sit there and go, "Oh, Dale, can I have a look at your CV, please?" Like, you wouldn't ask that in an office with your teammates, would you? So
I might do in the future now.
There's hi, I'm Dale. Here's my CV so you can learn a bit more about me. But it's just building up those relationships, and that's the key thing. And I think, for me, I think it's got to be a hybrid model with a couple of days set in stone, then 1 extra day for flexibility, because then you can go and sit with other teams that come in. So you do get that 1 extra day of wherever, especially if you're multi-site as well, go and see a different office. You and I both did that in our previous role, and it was great. We get to go and see different offices. Yeah, there might not be anyone there, and the office might not be the best office compared to the other, but it was nice to go and talk to some of these stakeholders that are there and talk to the other members of different teams that are there. And it's just that presence as well. I think that's one of the key things. You've got to be present and visible to build up, one, your reputation, but those relationships.
Yeah, I think, people have had the taste of it. And I think, people need to stop referring to, well, before COVID we did it. It's like, yeah, but there's lots of things that we did in the past that we no
That's
longer
5
do.
years ago now.
Yeah. And people, and it's proven that it does work. Even it was a very one-sided panorama episode about work from home, and it was very much tailored towards certain things. I think it was very personally very. I didn't like it. I feel like it wasn't really in a nice balanced approach. But even in that episode, it still highlighted research that showed that there was no more. Once 3 days in the office, so that hybrid 3 days, two days from home, was probably the most beneficial. You go in the office 4 or 5 days a week, it equaled no extra output. The output was still the same.
Well, yeah, makes sense.
They'd say then if you kind of go more towards completely remote or whatever else, that there was some areas where the output was lower, but it showed that there was no difference in output on all this research across many organisations, to show that going in 4 or 5 days a week was any more productive than being in the office 3 days a week. So the statistics are there, and everyone had to do it. Everyone had to do it at a period of time, and this is what kept businesses afloat. And
yeah, and it's these colleagues. Yeah, sorry to interject, but it's your workforce that are still there now that worked during COVID that adapted to this. I feel like if it really did keep you afloat as an organisation, I'm not saying you necessarily owe them one, because obviously you're still paying their wages and paying their bills effectively, but just have a bit of gratitude at the same time. Like, yes, establish it moving.
Employees.
Exactly. I mean, establish a new norm moving forwards. Absolutely. Tweak it slowly but surely. Don't just be like, okay, all in 5 days a week, because you will upset the apple cart. You will rock it. And all of a sudden, you've lost half your workforce, or you've lost your big hitters and your top performers, and then you're left with mediocrity. And then the output will naturally gravitate down, because they're the people that don't want to go in the office. And if they are in the office, they're not really going to do as much. They're going to be the ones having a coffee every 45 minutes, going chatting to 4 or 5 different people constantly, looking over their screen every minute of every day, not actually working.
Yeah, and I think, people, as I said, because people have had the taste, people know what works for them. And they know that either, let's be honest, by now, people either know that they love it or they hate it. And, again, there are differences. If you do a certain job, or let's be honest, say you've got five people in a team, 4 of them don't like work from home, either they don't have the space or they just don't enjoy it, like socially, they prefer to be in the office, then, you'd accept it that, that team is going to work in the office. And that, that's fine. And if that fifth, that one person out of the 5 decides, I really don't like being in the office 5 days a week, then that's their prerogative to, look elsewhere.
Of course it is.
You've got to think that if most people in that certain area have grown accustomed and like the working, and like we said, if some of the best people in those areas, they're just going to go, nah, because what I think is people are looking at, and I've looked at it myself, but more because of how they've worded being 5 days a week in the office. It just goes to show that who they are as an organisation as well, and whether people want to work for them, because they go, well, if you're just completely unwavering on any flexibility here, you're not going to offer flexibility in any other capacity, and you're probably not going to be very pro a lot of other things as well. And people
absolutely
start to look at it as an indicator of how that business is for everything. They'll look at you and your stance as a business on hybrid working or working from home or office work, whatever way we look at it. They're going to think that that's indicative of you as an organisation and in every other aspect. And I think that's the last thing you want. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're struggling to get the best talent, and you're also struggling to retain your good talent over where you want these people, even though you've got nothing to back up anything to do with output or whatever else to highlight it. And it's just because some people think anecdotally that it's the best way to be.
Yeah, it's an old school mentality, isn't it? And I think as a company or as an organisation, if you want people in the office, as we spoke about earlier, incentivise it slightly. So if you can offer season ticket on rails or bus passes, whatever it may be. But sometimes the office location makes a big impact. I know we spoke off air, obviously, about sort of working in London or in big cities, I should say, not necessarily just London. Sometimes you can move into the smaller areas. You have sort of more satellite offices. You can spread it a little bit more. But what's the attraction of working in a tiny little, like Herne Bay, for example? Why would you go and work in Herne Bay where there's hardly anything to do there? There's not many restaurants, not many pubs or cafes or coffee shops. And you've got a big office with 100 people in it. Why would you move there rather than have it in Canterbury, where you've got hub, lots of transport, you've got 2 big stations that can go there, so people can live further afield, still commute in, and you've got all your coffee shops, your restaurants, your sort of culture side of things as well, and it's more centralised. Yes, it may cost a little bit more, but you're offering that because you can actually build a culture and build a team, and you have team nights out after work, and it encourages teams to go. I'm not saying you have to drink alcohol, but go for food, go for drinks, social. There's all sorts of things, especially in Canterbury now. There's all sorts of things popping up that you can do as activities. So if you're an organisation, there's got to be incentives behind trying to get people to come back to the office. Because, as you said, we're setting our ways of working from home. You like working from home. You've got that nice balance. But if you're going to try and draw me back into the office, I'm not saying they have to do that. It's your job at the end of the day. But if you want to just keep people ticking over quite happy, look after them a little bit. Businesses are people.
It's more where like people are done. Let's be honest. If you live out in Kent or any of the other home counties, it's usually been the expectation. I'm gonna have to go. Like a lot of professions, I'm gonna have to work in London, and then you're getting on, a cramped, expensive train, day in, day out. Sometimes you might have to deal with delays because, there's weather issues, someone's on the track because people still don't understand the dangers of going on a track for some reason. And you got to deal with all of that, and then it's more expensive in London to buy your coffee and whatever else. So you got all these expenses and the time that it takes. Maybe businesses, if they want to do all this, they go, actually, like you said, let's not always have to be in London. Because surely that's cost. If businesses are worried, well, I've spent all this money on office space and renting. It's like, well, maybe you should have thought about renting elsewhere. We don't have to be everyone going into one place because also it's super, super cramped. But on those busy days, like you said, usually a Tuesday was the busiest day. And you're going in and everything is cramped. You can't get anywhere and you're trying to get down the escalator from the platform.
The tube you're bunching on, you're literally squashed in under some poor bloke's armpit, and you think, at 5 o'clock in the summer, you don't want that. That's not the place to be.
I still think, people have to. There's things have changed because of COVID, and there's a lot of positive, and there's obviously clearly going to be some negative as well. But we've got to always keep evolving. That's how we've moved forward as a society. Things have changed. Like we're not working 7 days a week anymore. We're not, doing all sorts. You're not people living in workhouses. Things do change, and we have to evolve with them. And actually, people, we want to see get the best out of people. And I don't think some of what we force people to do sometimes in these ridiculous hours and people, commuting and doing all this stuff, we've kind of seen it doesn't probably get the best out, and people have had the taste and maybe they want to change to it. And that's why you still see that pushback. We see it on our side. Candidates, I always try to endeavour to be as open as possible on there and say whether it's going to be, hybrid and if possible, try to be as descriptive as I can with it. But people care about that. People are like, can we move? Is there a possibility of it only being 2 days and instead of the 3 days? And people are still caring about it. The more senior you get in the role, the more I've been asked the questions around, the flexibility and do I have to be here on this one? Or because again, obviously I worked in a lot of places that multi-site, and they say, well, you said it's London, but any chance I can go to this place or this place as one of my days? And sometimes you've got hiring managers that are like, yeah, it's cool,
who cares?
I'm just going by the company policy of where we were before. Obviously company policy was strict 2 days you had to do your 2 days in the office.
But they don't care where you work. It doesn't
No.
matter where. As long as you make it worthwhile. And I think that's just a common sense thing. But no, I've experienced the same as you. Especially at kind of senior manager, director level. Generally speaking, they don't live in London. Without, it's very a blanket approach, stereotypical here, but they're on more money, so they've got nicer properties, more expensive properties that are further out of London. So you get more money, more house for your money, obviously, when you're further out anyway, naturally. So they don't want to be commuting every day. So I had people I was hiring for marketing directors and sort of like finance directors before, and literally one of the first questions was, okay, I saw in the advert it's hybrid, 3 days a week or 4 days a week in the office, 1 day at home. Can I do 2 days? I'm like, oh, not really. We need to be there. It's like, oh, okay, can I be flexible because of childcare or things like that? Can I come in the office early, leave early to go? I'm like, no, unfortunately not. And it's just company. It's not me choosing that. It's company. Like, oh, okay, well, I rescind my application then. I mean, we lost some absolute superstar talent because they just refuse to go to an organisation like that because their time is worth more than that. And I totally understand it. I totally empathise with them. But if you're like your owners or your directors board, whoever makes those decisions are choosing that, you need to realise that, especially if you're having difficulty hiring for that role as well, you need to look at these sort of, more minute details behind it.
I don't know. I hope that there has been a shift, and there's enough out there that push back to kind of keep it, and a lot of companies hopefully won't necessarily go. Obviously, a lot of analysis has shown that it's larger organisations that are pushing for it. Usually, they own their buildings and they want more out of it, I guess. Or they're renting the bigger office spaces, and obviously London rent is obviously not going to be cheap. But you also got to wonder as well, the job market in general is not great. Unemployment is rising. Will the cynic in me maybe perhaps think, oh, well, they'll utilise on this because actually people don't have as much choice, so people are going to bend on what they actually want, and just then enough of it will happen that the norm will then be back to 5 days in the office, which personally for me be quite sad. But then if that happens, then how much impact would it actually have on our jobs to get and help retain the best talent if the majority, the norm is back to 5 days in the office?
Yeah, I think on that note, I think a lot of the attitude will change. So if more and more companies are doing that, eventually that culture will shift back to what it used to be, which is a shame. If it does go that way, it's only something I'm noticing at the moment. But I also notice there's quite a lot of purely remote roles coming up at the moment.
Yeah,
which for me, I'm like, it sounds attractive, but how good is that long term? Not talking to any of your colleagues face to face, or to have meetings once a month. It's like, okay, that's great, but do you really build it? Can you imagine only meeting your teams 12 times a year? So there's pros and cons for everything. I mean, this is a huge debate, and this will rumble on for months and months, if not years. So I'm sure everyone that, if you're watching, listening, as always, let us know your thoughts on it. If you're an expert, if you're business owners and you've got your own opinion, that'd be great as well to get your kind of input on that and get your perspective. But thanks for listening, and thanks for watching, and tune in next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.